Well, it's the end of 2025 and it's certainly been an interesting one for a number of reasons. Usually here on the channel we end the year with an odder or more esoteric topic, and this December will be no exception. But it won't quite be on a specific item or camouflage or anything like that, but rather on something that just about everyone deals with in collecting spheres, be it militaria and surplus, trading cards, sneakers, figures, memorabilia, or whatever else. That is the actual act of buying, selling, and trading, or more specifically, techniques, tricks, scams, and obviously just interactions as a whole. Be it through straightforward websites like eBay, specific forums or groups dedicated to the hobby, or social media where posts and messages can bring new and hard-to-find items from around the world, options have exploded over the years thanks to the internet. This in turn has opened up new avenues and means of acquiring items, but also has led to an influx in questionable pieces, sketchy posts, and just straight-up scams. So why not enjoy the end of the year with this video where we'll be talking a bit about it, what to look out for, and bringing up some odd and just hilarious interactions that have been encountered while acquiring pieces. Now, before anything else, 2025 saw the 150,000 mile subscriber stone hit, so thank you to everyone who subscribed, watched, or just stopped by over the last year, as well as those who have been here even longer. It's greatly appreciated. Hopefully 2026 continues the upward trend as we try to get a bit more videos out each month, along with a little more variety in topics, formatting of videos, and just presentation overall. This past year there was a little bit of that with the Soviet Barks root beer giveaway, as well as the Bannerman video, which involved touring the island but also kayaking across the Hudson, as one actually has to launch from the western bank as it's the most convenient, the quickest, and easiest, but anyway, you get the idea. Actually, let's stop right here for a second and switch things up one more time by trying something new. Hey there, giving a new format idea something of a test run as the topic seemed pretty fitting and personal, plus there really wasn't that much B-roll and related footage to use for it, but we won't dwell on that. So why not take advantage of the situation and hop in front of the camera for the first time? As for the look, it's December and it's a little cold, so beyond looking like I just chased James Bond down a mountain, the purpose of all this is twofold. Also, this is the perfect opportunity to show that the narrations in past videos aren't AI by just doing this real quick. Yeah, you can see my lower face, and yes, there have been a few comments about it over the years, but okay, enough about that. Let's get back to the topic. If you've seen many of the videos here on the channel, you'll know that quite a bit of surplus and militaria is collected and obviously showcased for many topics. That is, unless it's something exceedingly rare, expensive, or old. Some have said that owning items doesn't make you an expert, and that's true, but it certainly can help teach you some things, such as with the multicam comparison video from November, where you can get a good grasp of the differences of not only the camouflages, but also the builds, manufacturers, differences between versions or iterations, and just features of the pieces overall. Seeing as in that instance it required uniforms from 5 separate countries spanning over 3 continents, a little legwork was required, and that's where the actual hunting down and buying element comes into play, and depending on the item it can be as simple as going to your local surplus store, or as hard as tracking down a person who has a set and having to go back and forth with them over whatever social media or messaging service. So with that all being said, let's actually get to the video. We'll start with online transactions, as they are without a doubt the most common way of getting items nowadays, whether it's through businesses or marketplaces like surplus companies, eBay, or through forums, groups, and social media like Facebook, Discord, or Instagram. The first thing you really want to do is to determine if an item is what the seller says it is as far as legitimacy or accuracy. Depending on said item, say a World War II German M42 helmet, you'd need to know the ins and outs to identify an original period one from a more recent replica, which this one actually is. But that's a whole other story, and there are plenty of guides for many items out there to help you with that. Overall though, you can really break this section down into 2 categories: full websites or individual listings. When it comes to the first, you really want to scrutinize the layout and really anything else about this site. There's always a few telltale signs if a website is legit or not, like the URL, layout, phrasing and structure of font and text, and perhaps most significant, prices. Additionally, as with anything online, you can always reverse image search the pictures associated with the items. If they're original or unique, there really shouldn't be any other ones out there save for maybe promotional posts or those copying them online asking for feedback. This can apply with individual sellers too. This is being brought up as back in 2024, the US company Americana Pipe Dream Apparel was dealing with scammers cloning their website, creating lookalike accounts on Instagram and other social media platforms, and even running ads online directing people to them. If you went to the fake website, you saw that they more or less copied everything but marked items for only a few dollars each, which to those unaware seemed like a steal, but at the end of the day they were really just stealing buyers' money and maybe a little more. AP posted a bunch regarding it while they tried to combat it with Meta and eventually got everything taken down, but just inspecting things like URL extensions and other information could have prevented many people from falling victim. They posted all about it on their website, and if you want to read through it, there's a link that will be in the description below. But what happens if a website seems like it's just old or underdeveloped, though it appears to be legit, or even more if it's somewhere in that middle ground between being suspicious and proper? The easiest and quickest thing to do is to see if anyone else has talked about it in the past. Often on Facebook or Reddit, users will post asking whether people have dealt with them before. If nothing, or you're still a little apprehensive, you can use a third-party payment service like Shop or PayPal, which offers payment protection. We'll get to that in a little bit, but also a service like Privacy.com, which allows you to create virtual cards that shield you from any potential scams or people trying to steal your money or identity, as it's just a preloaded thing you can set limits for. Though it can't guarantee you'll get the money you spent back, it can prevent anyone from trying to charge up your cards or worse. This, though, is a little different when dealing with individual sellers who may not have their own website but rather are selling something online somewhere. Say you come across a person selling some Czechoslovakian or Greco camo for a great price on some sort of secondhand site somewhere, and you just have to have it, but they only have one picture and not much info is added to it. It's not unheard of for sellers to just not have all the information about something and be less than proficient with a camera. It can sometimes be a benefit, as they may not know the true value, but also could be questionable due to a lack of details. Usually the first thing to do is check photos with the reverse image search again, as it can result in finding the same images somewhere else, meaning they could have just been lifted by a scammer who's just trying to dupe some unsuspecting buyers. If nothing pops up but you're still weary, you can obviously check their account to see things like how old it is or how recent they've joined said group or website, how many photos or other listings there are, and so on. Multiple posts or listings showing images with the same background can provide a baseline helping legitimize the seller some, but not always, and overall a lack of these is indicative that the account is fake, though again, not always, as on occasion the person may genuinely be new or just not that active beyond selling. If you're still not sure, you can always ask the seller for more information and pictures. If they refuse, that's most often a bad sign, though not necessarily an immediate indication they're not who they claim to be or the item isn't real. As from a few instances online, the seller could honestly just be a straight-up jackass who is either a FUD when it comes to surplus or internet sales that has their very specific system they don't deviate from, which can often be picked out easily as their item descriptions usually look more like manifestos. This has been the case with a few eBay sellers over the years, in which case you could have a little bit of fun if you want, but don't harass them or anything. That's not really cool. But if they do send images, this could help some, as it not only gives you some more info about the garment and surroundings they're seeing it. Again, reverse image search, and if nothing pops up, you should be good, but if you're still a bit weary, you can always ask them to take a photo with a note of their username or date on a piece of paper in front of the item. Sometimes it can be fun, though risky, to take a chance on an item. For example, the Cry Precision Army custom shirt that was featured in the just mentioned multicam comparison video was listed using just a blurry stock photo and nothing else. Granted, it was on eBay, which gives you buyer protection, but it could still have turned out to be incorrectly labeled, a fake, or anything else, but in the end, it likely came down to the seller being either lazy or just too busy to take a proper picture. But speaking about protections, that brings us to actual payment. If you're purchasing through a place like eBay or a website, you should be good, as they often offer buyer protections or checkout systems that do. However, if they're through a private transaction, that's another story. The most universal payment method out there remains PayPal, and oftentimes it's the easiest, safest, and most secure, with the option to send via goods and services, or GNS, in which you get a level of protection and a fee is deducted from the amount you send on the seller side, or friends and family, F&F, which is more of a money transfer kind of thing, which sees the sender have to pay a fee but has no protection associated with it. Frequently, sellers will ask for F&F so as to prevent losing money on their side. The best bet in this case is to just use a PayPal fee calculator and add the extra amount to cover it, and then send it via goods and services. Now, this obviously isn't foolproof and the end-all be-all payment system, as oftentimes others either won't have access to PayPal, will have access though have some sort of limit or restriction on their account, or will ask to use another service entirely, in which you'd want to just check to see if they have similar protections in place. But staying with PayPal for a moment, sometimes a seller who has a clear name or location will ask you to send to a completely different address, which may set off some alarm bells, and for good reason. Sometimes though, especially when dealing with overseas transactions, sellers seller may have a broker or middleman due to the aforementioned restrictions or limitations, in which case just use GNS. If it gets to be a hassle with them asking to send to assorted different accounts saying this person is X and that person is Y, and if you do this blah 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 it's because my account is locked or something akin to that, it's probably a good idea to maybe bow out and move on. But before sending any money through whatever means, you want to ensure that there is a proper timeline as to when things are being sent out, via what method, packaging, and if possible some sort of tracking or confirmation, as sales can turn to excuses and the next thing you know, protection periods have lapsed and your package never arrives. One such case of this occurred years ago before establishing more secured and verified sources for Iranian pieces. 3 camouflage uniforms were purchased, but the seller used others to ship them from different countries as well as from Iran, leading to a slew of excuses and tracking numbers that resulted in nothing, which ended in only 2 of the 3, with one not even being the correct uniform, arriving separately in literal plastic bags, shopping bags similar to this one. It was a miracle they arrived safe and sound. You get the idea. All that being said though, once a few deals are done with the seller and a report is made, spending money becomes easier and less concerning. This was certainly the case with collector and seller Shang-Chi, who has sold quite an assortment of pieces from China as well as various other countries that have their uniforms produced there. Being found on a Facebook group offering up a handful of items rather casually one day, the initial back and forth and setting up of payment methods was tricky, but since then it's been smooth sailing and some great pieces have come out of it. But that all talked about, we can now switch over to in-person sales, trades, and so on, which is obviously more direct and personal, but can have its own unique ups and downs too. Like the internet, in-person transactions can come in all shapes and forms based on location, person, and situation, though the most common iterations pretty much boil down to one of 2 categories: stores and physical locations, and events and shows. Guess that would be 4. Anyway, as for stores and physical locations, most often will come in the form of genuine surplus stores and secondhand and vintage shops like thrift, antique, and clothing stores, while events and shows are things like militaria or antique shows, markets, tag and estate sales, and so on. As far as surplus stores go, they're pretty straightforward, as often they'll have their items priced or categorized and easy to figure out, as everything is presented properly for the most part. Obviously, sometimes you may have to do a little digging or inquire where the good stuff is and so on, but it really needs no special process if you know what you're looking for. For secondhand shops, it really comes down to the type. If it's a basic thrift store, oftentimes prices are great, as all items will be marked based on the garment type, that is hats, jackets, trousers, and so on. It's just a matter of finding them. There's plenty of stories of people finding phenomenal items in these, since it's just another piece of clothing to them. Depending on where you are, it can be a great selection and other times next to nothing. In 2023, while traveling around Finland and the Baltics, vintage shops like UFF and Humana revealed quite a few fantastic pieces for prices that couldn't be beat, with the only downside being limited luggage space to bring them home. On the other side of the same coin, some vintage and thrift shops fall into that hip and trendy zone where they may have good items, but the prices are very, very high, and oftentimes for items that could otherwise be purchased for next to nothing. In New York City, for example, this West German border guard parka was found for about $100, liner and all, which isn't all that bad, but at the same time they were selling US Woodland and UCP trousers for $50 to $60 a pair, so it's really a toss-up. It's just a matter of finding the diamond in the rough, and if you can deal with the atmosphere of some of these places, best case you may find some great pieces, and worst case you'll get some laughs out of their pricing. As for antique and similar stores, they can sometimes have stuff you wouldn't expect. A place selling artwork, furniture, knickknacks, and so on may just have something kicking around, and usually they're priced pretty cheap as well. A perfect example of this was from an antique store in Riga, Latvia, which had this Soviet airborne padded helmet lying among random stuff in a corner, which they sold for €5, and it likely wasn't their speciality, and they didn't bother researching it all that much. In just about any case, you can take a stab at haggling some, as it never hurts. Obviously though, you'd want to gauge the location, as sometimes the price is the price, but others like smaller antique or thrift stores, there may be a little bit of wiggle room. A helmet just appeared on the table, which means we're switching sections to shows and markets, which can take many forms, like ones actually related to militaria, with others being more general, like flea or pop-ups. Both from a general standpoint are more or less the same thing, having vendors selling goods with the opportunity to haggle and make deals. The only difference being military ones usually see them knowledgeable, or at least somewhat aware of what they're selling. Depending on the size, location, and type of military show, you can expect interactions ranging from quick and easy with a great price to, I know what I got. Many more established shows that are larger in scale often see see older and rarer items, but also types of sellers and mentalities. Attitudes can range from being extremely nice, helpful, and open to haggling to being rude and dismissive as if you're bothering them when looking to find out more about an item or trying to strike up a deal. This, without saying, is nothing new and isn't exclusive to just militaria shows, but it seems a bit more prevalent. A bizarre example of this came a few years back at a show where a vendor had a very unique full body armor set, similar in design to ones worn by U.S. Ordnance Disposal Units. Think like the Hurt Locker. After initially asking a few questions and offering a price, the guy said something along the lines of,
why don't you come and ask me later on? Yesterday it was this price, today it's that, and tomorrow, if it's still here, it could be something else entirely.
Now, the offer was by no means a lowball one, and if the guy was serious about selling it, he'd have probably presumably gotten right to bartering. If he was set on the price, you'd think he'd just say that from the start. It just goes to show that you gotta expect anything and everything. As a friend once put, no offer is a bad offer, just a starting point, which is good to live by, unless you're offering like $10 on a $1,000 item or something absurd like that. Shifting over now to flea and other specific events or markets, these can definitely be a coin toss, but there's always a good chance of finding some great pieces, but because of this, you'll run into a wider array of sellers and situations. Sometimes you'll have that one person selling just militaria that knows what everything is and prices things accordingly, and other times just a random item mixed in a sea of entirely different things. With these cases, it's always good to check the price first and see if they know what the items are. Sometimes it's a steal, and other times it can be grossly overpriced. The video on the Brimfield Flea Market located in Massachusetts on the channel goes into this rather well, so check it out if you haven't yet. But having gone there at least one show every season for well over 10 years now, you can always find something and frequently walk away with a few amusing stories. Perhaps the most strange, though hilarious, and definitely most memorable encounter involved a seller who had a crate of surplus items mostly from Southern and Eastern Europe, like Yugoslavian M59 helmets, Hungarian swirl camel pieces, and assorted Polish pieces, to name a few. Inspecting an M59 helmet quickly, the seller said, "Yeah, that's French," followed by the price, to which I replied, "Actually, it's Yugoslavian or maybe Serbian." That particular one didn't have anything on the front, which prompted the guy to hastily reply with, "Well, what's the difference?" Overhearing this, those who were with me couldn't help but laugh, which apparently ticked the guy off so much so that he immediately said the price was now $20 more. In the end, it soured the transaction and led to a complete pass. As just stated, this obviously isn't the helmet. Granted, part of it was correcting him, which could be seen as unnecessary. It seemed like the guy was still a little sensitive to something even before the whole thing. To mirror this though, while wandering around Amsterdam in the Netherlands while on a trip with one of the same people from the last story, we came across a small weekend market with a vendor selling only military surplus. It was pretty cool. Going through the items, a few Flecktarn tops were found, and while inspecting them, the seller came up to me and stated the price, then asked if I knew what they were because they didn't appear German. Looking at them some more, along with the tags inside, I said Belgian. She smiled and then offered them to me for a few euros less and thanked me for the information. But at the end of the day, it's just good to get an idea of who and what you're dealing with and really play it by ear. Kindness often results in the same, and if they're rude or crass and you have the upper hand for whatever reason, absolutely take advantage of it. Just again, don't get argumentative or anything like that. Oh, and lastly, regardless of the place, situation, or person, if you're traveling, chances are good you'll run into a language barrier, so always have some basic way of conversing, like a translator app. Don't feel intimidated when trying to haggle. Sure, it may be a little trickier, but money talks, and so a deal can usually be made. Getting information about something, though, that's another story, as writing down numbers or using your hands to try and barter is one thing, but asking about where a Bulgarian export pattern worn by PLA and forces in Southwest Africa you found in a market in Tallinn, Estonia, to a guy who only spoke Russian in broken Russian likely won't result in much information. I think the guy just shrugged, but either way, that was fun. Now, we could be here all day covering everything when it comes to adding pieces to a collection, so we'll end here on one final element which seems to be a bit more on the rise, and since starting this channel has personally seen quite a huge uptick in instances. People reaching out to you, specifically vendors and manufacturers though. Individuals, that's no problem. At least once a month through Facebook or Instagram, uniform-related companies or businesses message offering custom pieces or stating how they can source this or make that, and thus far a majority of them have come from Central Asia, specifically Pakistan and India, which isn't surprising as a number of custom leather and decent quality reproduction pieces are made there. This might be a pretty niche topic, as likely they'll reach out only to public accounts or channels that are focused around uniforms, but it's still worth mentioning a bit. Most of the time it's honestly junk, as they're just mass-produced knockoffs or commercial copies like fake ACUs and Cryptek camo or something like that. But it's entirely possible they have access to legitimate sources, so you could give it a try and inquire. Maybe you'll end up with some Pakistani camo or one of those repurposed Indian helmets from that one video. Best case, you end up with a new contact. Worst case, you have a guy begging you over WhatsApp to try and get him uniform contracts from national governments of countries you don't even live in. That one was absolutely bizarre. There are all sorts of other venues and methods we could look into, like auctions, auctions, be they in person or online, through apps, websites, and so on. There's also the whole angle of movie, TV, and general media props and costumes, which is a whole other thing entirely. Additionally, there's plenty more to go into element-wise covered here, like thrift stores, which are always interesting as they can be so strange but also such great sources, but also hilariously pretentious sometimes. If the video is well received, we'll look into doing a second part and branching out a bit to take a bit more in-depth look at some of the topics discussed here. Though the discussion leaned heavily into militaria, a lot of this can certainly be applied to many other collecting spheres and items. You really just switch one word out for another. But as always, if you enjoyed the video, perhaps give it a like and subscribe if you haven't yet done so. On top of that, feel inclined to leave a comment below with your most bizarre, annoying, easy, hard, or just memorable collecting experience, or any other tips, tricks, or input. It's always interesting to hear from other people, their methods and perspectives on things like this. Again, a thanks to everyone for supporting the channel and getting us past 150,000 subscribers, and a thanks to both Gear Rack and Venture Surplus for sponsoring many of the videos throughout the last year. Neither sponsored this one, just wanted to give thanks. Anyway, hope everyone's having a good holiday season, and make sure to have a happy new year too. We got a few fun and unique ones lined up for 2026, so see you all then. By the way, this cup doesn't have anything in it. It is Soviet made though, so I guess that's pretty cool.